On an ordinary Thursday morning in the small town of Bellevue, Marcus Turner, a 14-year-old boy with big dreams but a quiet presence, woke up to the hum of his alarm clock. It was just another school day, one of many in his life. He lived with his mother, a hard-working nurse who did her best to raise Marcus in a neighborhood that wasn't exactly filled with opportunities. Still, she always told him to be kind, work hard, and never let the world make him feel small. Marcus, with his untidy hair and faded sneakers, didn't expect anything unusual to happen today. It was just another day of math problems, history lessons, and hanging out with his friends. As he gathered his things, his mother handed him his lunch and reminded him to be careful on his way to school, as she always did. As Marcus walked to school, the sun was beginning to rise, casting a soft golden glow across the neighborhood. The streets were quiet, the occasional dog barking in the distance, the sound of tires rolling along the cracked pavement as cars passed by. Bellevue was a small town, the kind where everyone knew everyone else, and nothing seemed to change too fast. It was a place where people went about their daily routines, where nothing extraordinary was expected. Yet Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that today was different. He didn't know how or why, but something felt off, something in the air, something waiting to happen. When Marcus arrived at school, he headed straight for his locker, the sound of his backpack scraping against the metal door the only noise in the otherwise calm hallway. He had a few minutes before the bell rang, so he decided to take a quick walk around the campus. The school was an older building with cracked windows and faded walls, but to Marcus, it was home. He wasn't popular, but he had a tight-knit group of friends who shared the same love for video games and basketball. As he walked near the school's main entrance, he noticed a commotion near the parking lot. Several students had gathered around, pointing at something on the ground. Curiosity got the better of him, and Marcus wandered over, trying to catch a glimpse of what everyone was looking at. On the pavement, partially hidden beneath a row of parked cars, was a black leather wallet. It looked out of place, far too expensive for the students who attended Bellevue High. It was thick, with a noticeable gold trim, and from where Marcus stood, he could see a few bills sticking out from its opening. His first instinct was to keep walking, to pretend he hadn't seen anything, to avoid getting involved in something that wasn't his problem. But there was something about the wallet, something that tugged at him. He bent down, carefully picking it up. The weight of it in his hands felt strange, like it didn't belong in his world. There were no other students around the area, so Marcus took the wallet and looked around to see if anyone had dropped it. No one seemed to be searching for it. And as the minutes passed, the wallet remained in his hands, a reminder of an impossible choice. He turned it over, seeing a small name tag on the inside, Mr. Gregory Thompson. The name meant nothing to him, but as he scanned the wallet, he saw what looked like credit cards, cash, and some important-looking documents. The kind of wallet that most people would fight for. Rich, powerful. It felt surreal, like he had stumbled upon a hidden treasure. But Marcus wasn't the kind of person who took things that didn't belong to him. He couldn't bring himself to keep it, not even with the temptation of the money that was in it. His mother's words echoed in his mind. Always do the right thing, even when no one is watching. So, after a deep breath, Marcus made up his mind. He would return the wallet. But where? The name meant nothing to him, and he had no way of knowing who Gregory Thompson was. Still, he figured it couldn't hurt to try. He walked to the office, his heart pounding as he approached the desk. A secretary with glasses looked up from her computer as Marcus hesitantly placed the wallet on the counter. "I found this outside near the parking lot," Marcus said, his voice almost a whisper. "It has a name in it. Maybe someone's looking for it." The secretary looked at him for a moment, her face unreadable. She picked up the wallet, turned it over in her hands, and then her eyes widened. "Oh, this belongs to Mr. Gregory Thompson," she said, speaking as though his name carried weight. "He's the CEO of Thompson Enterprises, one of the wealthiest men in the state. That's a big deal, young man. I'm sure he'll appreciate you returning it." A chill ran down Marcus's spine as she spoke, his mind racing with questions. Who was this man? Why would someone so rich be here, in a small town like Bellevue? But before he could ask, the secretary had already made a call. She spoke in low tones, her voice hurried, and Marcus could only make out bits and pieces of the conversation. Within minutes, a black luxury sedan pulled up in front of the school. Marcus stood by the office windows, his heart racing, as a tall man stepped out of the car. He wore a tailored suit, the kind of clothing that screamed power and wealth. He looked around the school as though he didn't belong, then made his way to the office. The man's presence was commanding, and Marcus could feel his own nervousness rise as the man entered the building. The door to the office opened, and the man walked straight toward Marcus, his face serious but not unkind. "You must be the young man who found my wallet," he said, his voice calm but firm. Marcus nodded, feeling both honored and intimidated by the man's presence. "Thank you," Mr. Thompson said, shaking Marcus's hand. "It's not every day someone shows such honesty. You're a rare one." Marcus didn't know how to respond, so he simply smiled awkwardly. And just like that, he thought he had done the right thing. But little did he know, this small act of kindness would set off a chain of events he could never have anticipated, events that would change his life forever. As Mr. Thompson left the office, Marcus turned back to the window and watched him drive away. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of life Mr. Thompson led. What did a man like that have to do with a small town like Bellevue? And why had he needed to be here, of all places, on such a regular Thursday morning? For the first time, Marcus felt like he was standing on the edge of something much bigger than his everyday life. But what he didn't know was that this was just the beginning. A simple act of returning a wallet would soon thrust him into a world of danger, confusion, and unexpected consequences that would test everything he believed about trust, kindness, and the consequences of doing the right thing. The next day at school, Marcus couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled in his chest. He woke up with the same quiet dread that had begun to follow him since returning the wallet. At first, he tried to convince himself that it was just a minor event, nothing to get worked up about. After all, he had done something good. He had returned a lost wallet, something most people would ignore. But the more he thought about it, the more it felt like he had stepped into a world far outside of his own. It wasn't just the luxury car that Mr. Thompson had arrived in, or the sharp suit that screamed wealth and power. It was the way people had reacted. The secretary at the school had seemed genuinely surprised that someone like Marcus would return the wallet. Her words echoed in his mind. "You're a rare one." Rare? It made him feel like some sort of anomaly, and for a split second, he wondered if he had made a mistake. The school day passed slowly, the usual hum of chatter filling the halls, but Marcus found himself distracted. His friends noticed that something was off. "Yo, Marcus, you okay?" Derek asked him during lunch, his voice low as he leaned in. Marcus shrugged, poking at his sandwich without much enthusiasm. "Just tired, I guess." But Derek wasn't buying it. "Tired? Man, you're always tired. You're acting weird. Something happened yesterday. You didn't get in trouble, did you?" Marcus hesitated. He hadn't told anyone about the wallet or about meeting Mr. Thompson. It didn't feel like something he should brag about. And it certainly didn't feel like something worth explaining, especially if the whole situation was going to end up being just a blip in his life. "No, it's just, I don't know. Weird stuff, you know," Marcus said, giving his friend a non-committal look. "Well, whatever it is, it's messing with your vibe, bro. You usually have more energy than this," Derek said with a grin, trying to lift Marcus's mood. But no matter how hard Marcus tried to push the thoughts away, they clung to him. After school, as he walked home, his mind was consumed with the same question. Why had Mr. Thompson been at his school in the first place? A part of him wished he could just forget about it, but the other part couldn't help but wonder if something bigger was going on. As he neared his house, Marcus heard the sound of a car pulling up behind him. He didn't think much of it at first, but then he heard the car slow down, the engine idling. When he turned around, he saw the familiar luxury sedan from the day before. His heart skipped a beat as the car stopped just a few feet from him. The passenger side window rolled down, and there, sitting in the car, was Mr. Gregory Thompson, looking very much out of place in the quiet neighborhood. "Marcus, right?" Mr. Thompson called out, his voice smooth and calm, though there was an odd urgency in his tone. Marcus froze, unsure of what to do. "Yeah," he called back, trying to keep his voice steady. Mr. Thompson's eyes scanned the street around them before he spoke again. "I need to talk to you, son. I know this might sound strange, but what you did yesterday, it means more than you might think. Can you come with me for a minute?" Marcus hesitated. Something about the way Mr. Thompson said, "It means more," made his stomach tighten. He looked down the street, seeing no one else around. Should he go with him? Was this a bad idea? But then, the rational part of his mind reminded him that Mr. Thompson was the one who had been so appreciative the day before. He had even shaken Marcus's hand and called him rare. What harm could there be in talking for a minute? "All right," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper as he walked cautiously to the passenger side of the car. Mr. Thompson leaned back in the seat, gesturing for Marcus to get in. "It's not far. Just a quick chat, I promise." Marcus slid into the car, the door closing behind him with a soft click. He wasn't sure what to expect, but the nerves in his chest only grew as the car started moving. They drove in silence for a while, the town quickly slipping by as they headed towards a part of Bellevue that Marcus had never really been to before. It was quieter, more isolated, with larger houses and sprawling lawns. The further they went, the more out of place Marcus felt. The car pulled into a driveway of a massive two-story home that looked like it belonged in a different world altogether. The house was surrounded by tall gates, stone walls, and a manicured lawn. As they parked in front of the house, Marcus couldn't help but feel like he had entered a whole new realm. "Come on inside, Marcus. I promise this won't take long," Mr. Thompson said, already stepping out of the car. Marcus followed him up the long driveway, his steps slow and cautious. As he entered the house, he was greeted by the cold elegance of the place. Marble floors, high ceilings, and expensive-looking art lined the walls. It was beautiful, yes, but it made Marcus feel even smaller, more out of place. Once inside, Mr. Thompson led him to a sitting room, offering him a seat on a plush sofa before taking the armchair across from him. "Do you know why I brought you here?" Mr. Thompson asked, his tone businesslike now, his eyes focused and sharp. Marcus shook his head, suddenly feeling a sense of unease. "Well, Marcus, you're not just any kid. That wallet you returned was mine, yes, but it also had something inside that you wouldn't have known about. You see, that wallet wasn't just lost," Mr. Thompson continued, leaning forward slightly. "It was part of something much bigger, something that's been a part of my life for a long time." Marcus's heart started to race as the words sank in. "What do you mean? What's going on?" "Let's just say, the wallet was carrying more than money. It had some sensitive information, and now that you've returned it..." Mr. Thompson's voice trailed off as he paused, almost like he was weighing his next words carefully. "I'm not sure what you're asking me, Mr. Thompson," Marcus said, the confusion mounting. Mr. Thompson finally let out a sigh, sitting back in his chair. "What I'm asking you, Marcus, is whether you're ready for what's to come. Because, you see, returning that wallet, you've just gotten yourself involved in something you didn't expect. Something bigger than you, bigger than me." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What had he gotten himself into? His mind raced with questions, but Mr. Thompson wasn't finished. "Trust me, you'll understand soon enough," he said with a cryptic smile, his eyes darkening as he leaned back in his chair. "And when you do, you might wish you hadn't returned the wallet at all." For the first time, Marcus felt the weight of the decision he had made. He had returned a simple wallet, thinking he was doing the right thing. But now, the uncertainty, the danger, and the realization that he had unknowingly walked into something far more dangerous had started to hit him. He had no idea how deep this would go or where it would lead, but he had a feeling he wasn't going to be able to walk away from it anytime soon. The days following Marcus's unexpected meeting with Mr. Thompson were a blur of confusion and unease. At first, he tried to shake off the feeling that something had shifted in his life, that one simple act of returning a wallet had somehow set off a chain of events that was beyond his control. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that he couldn't ignore it. The cryptic words Mr. Thompson had spoken that day kept echoing in his mind. "You've gotten yourself involved in something bigger than you." Marcus didn't know what that something was, but he had a sinking feeling that it wasn't good. The school had been relatively quiet in the days after the incident, but that morning, on Monday, after the weekend had passed, the routine was shattered. As Marcus walked into school, he noticed an unusual tension in the air. The halls were quieter than usual, students glancing nervously at each other as if they were waiting for something to happen. By third period, Marcus had heard the rumors. It started with Derek, who was acting more serious than usual as he sat across from Marcus in history class. "You here?" Derek asked, his voice low as he leaned in. "They said there's some big deal happening with Mr. Thompson. The cops showed up at his company's office last night. Something about a money laundering scheme." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. "What?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "I'm serious," Derek said, glancing around before continuing. "Apparently, Mr. Thompson's been under investigation for months. They were looking into his accounts and found something big. People are saying he's been laundering money for some mafia group or something." Marcus's mind raced, but he couldn't quite process it. The Mr. Thompson he had met, kind, polite, almost fatherly, didn't seem like the type to be involved in something so sinister. But then, maybe that was the point. Maybe it was all an act. "Isn't it strange, though?" Derek continued, as if he hadn't noticed the shock on Marcus's face. "He seemed so normal when he talked to you. But now, everyone's talking about this whole mess. They say the police are going to be questioning everyone involved with him." Marcus couldn't focus on the lesson anymore. His thoughts were spiraling. Mr. Thompson had told him there was more to the wallet, but he had no idea what that more actually meant. Was he really just an innocent kid who had returned a lost wallet, or was he now somehow wrapped up in the mess of money laundering and criminal activity? The thought sent a chill through him, and he couldn't shake it. What did Mr. Thompson want from him? That afternoon, as Marcus left class and walked to the school exit, he heard a sudden commotion by the front doors. He turned to see several police officers entering the building, their uniforms sharp and official, their faces grim. The students in the hallway paused, watching with a mix of curiosity and fear. They didn't know what was happening, but there was no denying the tension in the air. As Marcus walked closer, he saw one of the officers speaking to the principal, who seemed visibly shaken. The principal's face was pale, and he kept glancing around nervously, almost like he was expecting something or someone dangerous. And then, as if on cue, the officers began to approach Marcus. His heart raced in his chest as he tried to remain calm. He had done nothing wrong, had he? But the sight of them coming closer felt like the walls were closing in. One of the officers, a tall man with a stern expression, called his name. "Marcus Turner." Marcus's throat went dry. He nodded, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yeah." The officer took a step forward, and the other students began to back away, sensing the gravity of the situation. "We need to speak with you, son. It's about Mr. Gregory Thompson. Please come with us." Marcus's stomach dropped. Mr. Thompson's name again. What was going on? Why was the police here? He had only returned a wallet. Surely that didn't warrant this kind of attention. But deep down, Marcus felt the growing sense of dread that something much bigger was unfolding, and he was right in the middle of it. Without another word, the officer led Marcus to a waiting squad car. He felt the eyes of the other students on him as he walked away, his heart pounding with every step. He couldn't make sense of any of it. Had Mr. Thompson truly been involved in something criminal? Had he known all along? And if so, what did that mean for Marcus? The drive to the police station felt like a lifetime. The officers didn't say much, just kept glancing at him from the rearview mirror as the city skyline blurred by. Marcus sat in silence, trying to make sense of everything. But it was hard to think with his mind spinning in so many directions. When they finally arrived at the station, Marcus was escorted inside, where he was immediately ushered into an interrogation room. It wasn't long before another officer, a woman with short dark hair, walked in. "You're Marcus Turner, right?" she asked, sitting across from him. Her voice was calm, but Marcus could sense a level of seriousness in her tone. "Yeah," he replied quietly. "We need to know everything that happened between you and Gregory Thompson," the officer continued. "Did he ask you to do anything suspicious? Did he give you any instructions, or did you notice anything strange about the wallet?" Marcus's mind raced. He had no idea what they were talking about. I just found the wallet. I didn't know who he was. I just returned it. That's all." The officer looked at him for a long moment before nodding. "We understand. But there's more to this than you know, Marcus. Much more. We need you to be honest with us. Do you have any idea why Gregory Thompson would have been so interested in your returning that wallet?" Marcus felt his stomach turn. His instincts told him to tell the truth, but the more he thought about it, the more the whole thing felt like it was spiraling out of his control. He had just returned a wallet. That was it. Why was the police involved in this? What could he possibly know that could make a difference? But the look in the officer's eyes told him it was more than just a simple case. This was serious. "I didn't know anything about it," Marcus finally said, his voice shaky. "I swear, I just returned it. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know it was a big deal. I just thought it was the right thing to do." The officer leaned back in her chair, studying him carefully. "We're going to look into it further, Marcus. But just so you know, the decision you made to return that wallet, it's part of something bigger, something that's been going on for a long time. And you're now involved in a situation that could change everything." The words hit Marcus like a ton of bricks. The innocent act of returning a lost wallet had led him straight into a web of danger and deceit. He hadn't realized it then, but he was now caught in something that could bring down powerful people, and he had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. As the officer left the room to make her report, Marcus sat there, stunned. What had started as a simple decision to do the right thing had turned his life upside down. And it wasn't over yet. The days after Marcus's interrogation felt like a fog of confusion and anxiety. He had always been the kind of person who kept his head down and avoided trouble. But now he found himself at the center of a storm that he never saw coming, swept up in a situation he didn't understand. The police had assured him they would keep him informed, but the silence that followed only added to his unease. All Marcus could do was wait, but waiting in a world of uncertainty was the hardest part. The tension in Bellevue was palpable. Everywhere Marcus went, he could feel the eyes of others on him. His classmates no longer treated him like just another student. Whispers followed him down the hallways, and the occasional sidelong glance made him feel as if he were under constant surveillance. Even his friends, once the people he confided in, were distant, unsure of what to make of the growing rumors surrounding his involvement with Mr. Thompson. But what really gnawed at him was the fact that he had no answers. What had he gotten himself into? And more importantly, what did Mr. Thompson want from him? It wasn't until Thursday afternoon, a full week after the police had first questioned him, that Marcus got his answer. He was walking home from school, trying to block out the noise in his head, when he noticed a black car parked at the curb just ahead. It wasn't the same car that Mr. Thompson had driven before, but there was something about it that made Marcus's pulse quicken. He had a bad feeling, an instinctive warning that something was about to happen. His steps slowed as he approached the car, his breath catching in his throat. Before he could turn around, the door to the car opened, and Mr. Thompson stepped out. His face was grave, his usual polished demeanor gone, replaced by a weariness that Marcus hadn't seen before. "Marcus," Mr. Thompson greeted him, his voice soft but edged with urgency. "We need to talk." Marcus didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. This was the moment he had been dreading. The answers he had been searching for were finally within reach. But would they be the answers he wanted? "What's going on?" Marcus asked, trying to sound braver than he felt. Mr. Thompson glanced around, as if ensuring they were alone. "Get in the car," he said quietly. "It's not safe to talk here." Marcus hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to walk away, to run back home where things were simple and his life wasn't tangled up in the affairs of dangerous men. But deep down, he knew he had no choice. He was already too deep, already involved in something that couldn't be undone. He couldn't outrun it. So, with a reluctant nod, he climbed into the car. The drive was silent for a while, with only the soft hum of the engine filling the space between them. The streets of Bellevue blurred by, but Marcus barely noticed. His mind was too consumed by the possibility of what Mr. Thompson might say. And more than anything, he needed to understand what had happened to him. Finally, Mr. Thompson broke the silence. "What I'm about to tell you is something you need to understand, Marcus," he began, his voice low and serious. "You've been caught in something bigger than you. The wallet you returned, what you didn't know at the time, is tied to a criminal operation that's been going on for years. Money laundering, smuggling, things you wouldn't even believe." Marcus's heart began to race. He had heard bits and pieces of the rumors, but hearing it from Mr. Thompson himself made it feel so much more real. The questions that had been swirling in his mind suddenly began to coalesce into something terrifying. Had he unknowingly become involved with criminals? "Money laundering," Marcus echoed, his voice shaky. "But I just returned a wallet. How could that be connected to anything like that?" Mr. Thompson gave him a hard, almost regretful look. "Because that wallet didn't just have money in it. It had information. Information that connects me to a network of people who aren't just businessmen. They're dangerous people. And now that you've returned the wallet, they know you're involved, whether you wanted to be or not." Marcus could barely process the words. His mind raced as the weight of the situation crashed over him. "So, what does that mean for me?" "It means," Mr. Thompson said, his voice darkening, "that you're a target. These people, these criminals, they won't stop until they know who else is involved. They won't care whether you're innocent or not. They'll come after anyone who might know something about the operation. And now, Marcus, you're one of those people." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "You're saying I'm in danger?" Mr. Thompson nodded slowly. "Yes, but you're not alone in this. I'm going to do everything I can to protect you. But you have to understand, the only way out of this is to go on the offense. You can't hide from them, and you can't stay silent." A cold chill ran through Marcus. He had never imagined that one simple decision, returning a lost wallet, could lead him into such a terrifying situation. It felt surreal. "Why are you telling me this now?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because," Mr. Thompson said, his gaze fixed on the road ahead, "the police are closing in. They've started investigating me, and I don't know how much longer I can keep this all under control. But I've got resources, people who can help us get out of this clean. You just need to trust me." Marcus didn't know whether he should be terrified or grateful. Everything he thought he knew about Mr. Thompson had been turned upside down. The man who had once seemed like a pillar of the community, a successful businessman, was now someone embroiled in criminal activity. And Marcus, through no fault of his own, was now tied to him in a way that he couldn't escape. "What do you want me to do?" Marcus asked, his voice trembling. "There's no going back," Mr. Thompson said, "but I'm going to give you a choice. You can either stay here, keep your head down, and hope the authorities will protect you, or you can help me. Help me bring down the people who've been controlling everything from the shadows." Marcus's mind was reeling. He didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do. How could he make a decision like that? He was just a kid, but the weight of Mr. Thompson's words hung in the air, heavy with the gravity of the situation. This wasn't something he could just walk away from. His life had already been changed, and the only question now was whether he would run from it or face it head-on. The car slowed as they approached an unmarked building on the outskirts of town. Mr. Thompson turned to Marcus, his face unreadable. "Think about it carefully," he said. "I don't expect you to make a decision right now. But whatever you choose, know that this is your chance to change the course of your life. You can walk away from all of this and pretend it never happened, or you can help me finish what we started." As the car came to a stop, Marcus stared out the window at the building in front of him, a sense of dread creeping up his spine. This was it, the moment when everything in his life would change, and he had no idea which direction to go. The days that followed that conversation with Mr. Thompson felt like they were happening in a different world altogether. Marcus had no idea how to proceed. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like a physical burden, and no matter how much he tried to block it out, it remained inescapable. The idea that his life had been irrevocably altered by something as simple as returning a lost wallet was almost impossible to believe. How had everything escalated so quickly? He had gone from an ordinary schoolboy to someone involved in a criminal operation, and now Mr. Thompson was offering him a chance to fight back, or to walk away. Marcus spent the next few days wrestling with the decision. His days at school were filled with whispers, judging looks, and an overwhelming sense of unease. At lunch, he tried to sit with his friends, but it felt as if a wall had been erected between them. Derek and the others didn't know what to say. They had heard the rumors, the police presence at the school, the strange things happening around Bellevue. They asked Marcus how he was doing, but the moment they tried to bring up what had happened, it was like the conversation hit an invisible barrier. "You okay, man?" Derek asked one afternoon, his voice low and full of concern. Marcus tried to smile, but it felt forced. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just stuff to deal with, you know." But he wasn't fine. He wasn't fine at all. The weight of Mr. Thompson's offer hung over him, gnawing at him from the inside out. He didn't want to get any deeper into this mess. He had always kept his distance from trouble, always stayed out of the way. But now, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape the feeling that something was coming, that the people behind Mr. Thompson weren't going to let him go so easily. And then, on Friday afternoon, the final catalyst for Marcus's decision arrived. He was walking home again, thinking about everything, when he saw the familiar black sedan parked outside his house. His heart lurched. He hadn't seen Mr. Thompson in a couple of days, and now here he was, showing up unannounced. There was no turning back now. Marcus approached the car with a sense of resignation. The door opened, and Mr. Thompson was waiting for him. "Marcus, we need to talk," Mr. Thompson said, his voice low and urgent. The usual calm, collected businessman was gone, replaced by someone who looked more like a man who was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He had been expecting this moment. But now that it had arrived, he was paralyzed by indecision. He had no idea what the right choice was. His head was full of conflicting thoughts, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't stay stuck in limbo forever. "Come on, son. We don't have time," Mr. Thompson said, his words clipped. "You're involved now. The people I've been telling you about. They know your name. They know you were the one who returned that wallet. And trust me when I say they'll come after you, if we don't act now." Marcus's stomach tightened at the mention of the people Mr. Thompson kept referring to. He didn't want to be involved in anything dangerous. He was just a kid, but at that moment, He realized something crucial. There was no going back. No matter how hard he tried to pull away, he was already in it. "What do you want me to do?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His hands were trembling as he gripped the car door, his mind racing through a million different scenarios. There was no turning back now. "I want you to help me gather information," Mr. Thompson said, his eyes narrowing as he leaned in closer. "I've spent years building my empire, and now these people are trying to tear it all down. They've got agents inside the government, inside the police force. They know everything. But I've got people on my side too. You'll be working with them. We need to uncover who these people are, where they're hiding, and what they've been doing." Marcus's mind swirled with confusion. His instinct screamed at him to run, to distance himself from all of it, but the reality was clear. He couldn't. It was too late for that. "Help me, Marcus," Mr. Thompson repeated, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "Help me expose them, and we can take them down together. It's your chance to make a difference, to stop all of this from getting worse." Marcus stood there, torn. His heart wanted to believe Mr. Thompson. He wanted to believe that he could do something good, something right, and that by working with this man, he could bring an end to the dangers that had surrounded him since the moment he had found that wallet. But he also knew that once he crossed that line, there would be no going back. "I can't do this alone," Mr. Thompson continued, his tone more urgent now. "I need someone who understands, someone who's willing to fight for what's right. I'm offering you a chance, Marcus. Don't let fear hold you back." Marcus looked at the man before him, the man who had been kind, who had shown him trust, but who now had become something darker, something more dangerous. Was this the same man he had returned the wallet to? The man who had seemed so genuine, so appreciative. Now, Marcus wasn't sure who he was anymore. But as he stood there, Marcus realized something important. This wasn't just about Mr. Thompson, or the wallet, or the money laundering scheme. This was about his own sense of integrity, his own belief in what was right. This was about standing up for something greater than himself. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus made his decision. "I'll help," he said, his voice firm, though his heart raced in his chest. "But I need to know everything. I need to know what I'm really getting into." Mr. Thompson nodded, a look of relief washing over his face. "You've made the right choice. I'll take you to the people who can fill you in on everything. From here on out, Marcus, you'll be part of something bigger than you ever imagined. And together, we'll bring this all to an end." With that, Marcus got into the car, knowing that his life was about to change forever. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and shadowed by the unknown, but it was a path he had chosen. Whether he was ready for what lay ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: he would never be the same again. As the car sped away, Marcus felt a strange mixture of fear and determination. This was no longer just about him. He had chosen a side, and now he had to see it through to the end, no matter what. But as they drove deeper into the unknown, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far bigger than he could ever have imagined. The moment Marcus stepped into the dimly lit room of the hidden safe house, everything changed. The air was thick with tension, the walls lined with unmarked documents, maps, and equipment that looked more like something out of a spy movie than his reality. He could feel the weight of the decision he had made sinking in deeper with every passing second. As he walked further into the room, a few figures turned to greet him. They weren't familiar faces, but the looks they gave him were calculating and serious, their eyes scanning him in ways that made him uncomfortable. These were the people Mr. Thompson had been talking about, the ones who would help him in this dangerous game. Marcus swallowed hard as Mr. Thompson gestured for him to sit at the large wooden table in the center of the room. The group gathered around, including a sharp-eyed woman in her early 30s named Olivia, and a burly man with tattoos covering his arms named Cole. There was another man too, an older, quieter figure with glasses, who appeared to be more of a technical expert. They all had one thing in common. They looked like people who knew how to survive in the shadows, people who lived in a world that Marcus had never known existed. They were part of a network, part of an operation that Marcus now found himself entangled in. "Marcus," Mr. Thompson said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of the situation. "These are my trusted allies, Olivia, Cole, and Benjamin. They've all been working for me for years. They know how this world works, and they know how to fight back." Marcus nodded nervously, still processing what was happening. He had come to terms with the fact that there was no way out. He had crossed a line, and now he had to see this through. But what was the plan? What were they going to do? And most pressing of all, how could he, a kid who had once been content with his life in Bellevue, actually help bring down a criminal operation of this scale? Olivia spoke first. Her voice was sharp and no nonsense. "We've been tracking these people for months," she said, her eyes narrowing as she pulled out a large map of the city. "They're everywhere, inside the police force, in key positions in local government, and even in some major companies. They have their hands in so many different illegal businesses, it's almost impossible to track it all. But one thing we know for sure is that they won't stop until they've silenced everyone who would threaten them." Marcus felt his stomach turn. These weren't just small-time criminals. They were powerful people, operating under the radar, controlling everything from the shadows. And now, he was a part of this world too. "We've already started putting the pieces together," Olivia continued, pointing to different locations on the map. "But what we need is someone on the inside. Someone who can gather intel without drawing attention. That's where you come in, Marcus." Marcus's heart began to race. "Me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to do any of this. I'm just a kid. I don't know how to infiltrate anything." Mr. Thompson looked at him, his expression serious but reassuring. "You may be young, but you have something these people don't expect. Innocence. You can go places they wouldn't suspect. You can talk to people, move through areas they never thought a kid like you could get to. They won't know you're watching them until it's too late." Marcus swallowed hard. He was terrified. The idea of being involved in something so big, so dangerous, felt completely overwhelming. He had no experience, no knowledge of how to track people or gather intelligence. He had never even considered a life like this, and now he was supposed to be part of it. But as he looked around the room at the people who had placed their trust in him, something shifted inside him. They needed him, and he had already made a choice. He had already stepped into this world. There was no going back. "I'll do it," Marcus said, the words coming out more firmly than he expected. His hands were still shaking, but the decision was made. He had to see this through, even if he didn't know exactly what it would mean for him. "Good," Olivia said, her lips curling into a brief but approving smile. "We'll help you every step of the way. You're not in this alone. But you need to understand, Marcus, this isn't just about getting some information. This is about protecting yourself and the people you care about. These people won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to stay hidden. They'll kill to protect their operation." A cold shiver ran down Marcus's spine. He wasn't just dealing with criminals. He was dealing with people who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. But that was the reality now, and he had to face it. He had to keep his head straight, no matter how scared he was. Cole spoke up then, his voice gruff and deep. "We'll start small. We'll need you to track a few of their low-level people, get their schedules, and find out who they're working with. We'll provide you with tools, phones, cameras, anything you need to collect intel. You do your part, and we'll be one step closer to bringing this whole operation down." The plan sounded simple enough, but Marcus knew it wouldn't be. These weren't just petty criminals. These were dangerous people with resources, power, and reach. It wasn't going to be as easy as taking a few photos or writing down a couple of names. He would be stepping into a world full of lies, manipulation, and risk. Every step he took could bring him closer to danger, closer to being discovered. But what other choice did he have? He had already made a deal with Mr. Thompson. He had already chosen to fight back. As the meeting wrapped up, Mr. Thompson gave Marcus one final piece of advice. Remember, Marcus, you're not just fighting for yourself anymore. You're fighting for everyone these people have hurt. The people who are too scared to speak out. You're doing the right thing, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. That night, as Marcus lay in bed, he couldn't sleep. His mind was buzzing with all the things he had just learned, all the new responsibilities he had just taken on. The weight of it all felt heavy on his chest. He was just a kid. He had never asked for this, never imagined his life would turn into a battle between good and evil. But now there was no turning back. His decisions had brought him to this point, and now he had to make them count. He wasn't sure what lay ahead, how many people he would have to deceive, how many lies he would have to tell, but he knew one thing. His life had been changed in a way he could never have prepared for. And now, all he could do was move forward, step by step, into the darkness, hoping that in the end, he would be able to survive and make a difference. The world he once knew, the one where he walked to school with his head down, not worrying about anything except his next test or game, was gone. In its place was something much darker, much more dangerous. But no matter how afraid he was, Marcus knew one thing. He had to keep going. The stakes were too high for him to back down now. He was in the fight of his life, and he wasn't going to lose.